We've just a week to go now before we're live on stage with the new show, Cocaine Cowboys. Final tickets on sale from mcd.ie or venues. Isn't it funny, like, you know, you look at a picture of Sandra Hehir.
Yeah.
And like you couldn't deny that she was Christy Keane's sister.
No.
Isn't it funny sometimes the genetics are so strong in people's features and all the rest of it?
Yeah.
She's very like him. Anyway.
And he's a very well-known face, isn't he?
He's a very well-known face. And she mightn't like that. I mean, I don't think any woman likes that they look like a man, but I just mean the features.
Yeah.
She's quite a strong feature. Good-looking woman, actually. So she's a sister of the gang patriarch Christy Keane, and she was caught with €124,000 in her attic. She's pleaded guilty to money laundering offences in relation to this, but has denied any involvement in criminal activity. So how does that work? You plead guilty to money laundering, and yet you're...
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, is it not now the worst excuse ever to bring in a bit of gambling into the gambling money into your defence when it comes to money laundering?
Well, I mean, I have to say, if I had an attic for a start, and there was 124,000 in it, wrapped up and laid out on a sheet of plastic, and it was there with a tick list, right? And somebody in my household told me that they'd done well in the gambling.
Yeah,
I would question it.
You would.
I'd first of all question why it was in the attic.
Yeah.
Second of all, why there was a tick list with it. And third of all, why it hadn't just been handed over so we could go blow it.
Yes, exactly. I mean, look, the gambling thing, I mean, people have to update that, maybe I won it on Bitcoin or, something like that. But obviously that is not the excuse she gave. What she said was, she said that her late husband had told her that he'd won a lot of money on gambling, and that's where the location, that's the source of this money. I think this case shows a couple of things. It shows how deep that familial organisations are in Limerick. Obviously there's four clans named always in the famous Limerick feud, the McCarthy-Dundons and the Keane-Collopys. But, Limerick is a small city, as you said before, and those familial networks have become really important. It also shows a kind of the scale maybe of the operations that you're talking about. That's a huge amount of money, 124,000 in cash.
What would it look like? Like in a little bundle?
I don't know, because of...
Would it be little?
No, well, it would be that, again, the hand movements you're making there don't make a lot of sense on...
Would it fit in your handbag?
I don't think. No.
Suitcase?
No. A suitcase, absolutely.
A Ryanair suitcase?
Yeah, but I mean, probably even less than that, like a half a suitcase. I actually don't know, but I would guess.
I'd love to see it.
Well, I mean, I think you can get a couple of million in a suitcase, can you?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's a lot of money, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, it's a huge amount of cash.
Yeah.
The idea most people would never have seen.
Imagine your attic went on fire.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or if you had mice in your attic and they ate it.
I suppose as well, you see, like that money is ultimately seized and it's taken into the coffers of the state. Like 124,000. If you were to buy drugs with that would be, you'd get a huge amount.
You would.
So it's a big amount of money, but it doesn't kill the organisation either. That crime organisation, they're still able to function. So you can see a couple of things. You can see how the familial networks are really important. You can see the scale that they're operating on, even within sort of, the Keane Collopy gang, or even just the Keane crime organisation, is a big organisation, has probably become stronger in recent years than it had been at a certain point.
Well, it became sophisticated. It came out of those Limerick gang wars, and Christy Keane pretty much put his head down to do proper business.
Yes. And he relied on a network of younger people, people now in their early 30s maybe, who really took up the mantle, had very strong ties with various gangs in Dublin, and became a bit more sophisticated, veered away from the kind of mindless feuding, the social media taunts. All of that has really dropped off. These people have become more money focused, and they have their their clients across various parts of Munster and beyond.
But they developed an extremely sophisticated money laundering network.
They did. But they still relied on those familial bonds. There's still a network of clans, I suppose, and they remain as important as ever.
It's interesting the date that this money was discovered in the attic, and she's an address. She's a 56-year-old woman, an address at Assumpta Park, Island Road, Limerick City, and it was June 17th, 2020. that was discovered, which was right around the time of the EncroChat hack. We have no evidence given to court or no idea whether or not the Keane network were using EncroChat phones. But that was around the time that the police all over Europe started to move in on targets that they had built up intelligence on. I'm just throwing that out there because I'm
just throwing it out.
I'm just saying, well, you know what I mean? It'd be nice to think that behind the scenes they were picking up a little bit of intel and actually reacting to it, as opposed to, not.
Yeah, and in fairness to Sandra Hehir, like, she is not somebody that has appeared on the Garda radar necessarily. There have been other women associated with the Keane faction that have appeared again and again and have been in previous court cases. In court, this, as she wasn't sentenced. That's been put back to February the 24th. But you did hear that she has no convictions, and her own solicitor described herself as, mostly disassociating with her family members. However,
she works as a hairdresser and
lives a modest lifestyle, and her own solicitor claimed she was unlikely to offend, which probably is true. However, the discovery of the money and her conviction comes in the aftermath of the conviction of her son Warren. And Warren Hehir, had, I think at the time of his most recent conviction, where he got a 5-year sentence with, I think, 3 months suspended, he had 54 convictions. So he was very much a key figure in the money laundering network for the Keane.
Was described, like 54 convictions and all the rest of it, it was described as a mid-level member of that gang.
Yeah.
Not a high-ranking one.
Not a high-ranking. So, but I mean, I think he had a previous conviction as well for in regards to money.
And that could have been his own people that described him as that at the same time.
It could have been, but I think in reality you're seeing that he was somebody that was trusted with money, and had, he was caught with, I think again it was it 51,000 euros, so a significant sum, if not multi-millions either.
59,000. And again, the dates that he pleaded guilty to in regard to this was August the 8th, 2019 and June 17th, 2020, when there was a move on them. He was found to have converted, transferred or handled cash to the value of 59,000, knowing or believing or being reckless as to whether the property was the proceeds of criminal conduct.
Yes.
Discharging sums due and owing in respect of works carried out on a house at Kilmurray Court, Garryowen, Limerick. And it was his wife as well was caught up in that, Vicky Hehir.
Yeah.
She was given a 2-year suspended sentence for transferring 12,000 euro in cash to a builder. Around that time, they were renovating their home.
Yeah, so you see, again, like we've, also his Vicky Hehir, she avoided a prison sentence partly because the judge said it would be unduly harsh on her 3 children if she was to get a custodial sentence. But also Sandra Hehir, it also, you heard details of while, that she paid off her mortgage effectively, she managed to build up a nest egg of 68,000 in her bank account that couldn't be explained, according to the police. And she ultimately withdrew 70,000 and paid off her mortgage. So again, you see that money that's spent on houses, on builders, it really can come back to haunt people, can't it? And it just comes back again and again. But what else?
And I mean, the thing is, she's going to be hoping for a suspended sentence similar to her daughter-in-law on this. But her daughter-in-law's plea was in relation to 12,000 euro. I mean, there's a lot of money involved here.
There's a lot of money. I mean,
a lot higher stakes here.
It is. It's a huge amount of money for any ordinary person. And you can see it's those transactions involving property, involving businesses, involving cars that are very hard to get away with if the police really start focusing in on your, what they do is they get in forensic accountants, or they, and they look at how much money you can generate. And while you can.
But they look at, revenue. I mean, everything we should earn, it goes through revenue. And in this case, Hehir had, the information was received from the revenue commissioners that showed that she earned 35,000 a year as a hairdresser, that she was in receipt of COVID payments and the widow's pension, which made up that 35,000. So really, 35,000. Yeah, could you afford to save that amount and pay off your mortgage in 5 years?
Pay off
hard enough.
It'd be very, very difficult, and it's very hard to justify that. And we've seen people come to court again and again and try and say, I got this from a relative, I got this from I got this gift. It just doesn't seem to work.
So she was basically saving this money, and the evidence was that every time she reached 20,000 in savings, she would stop the account there and open a new one. The court was told that 70,000 was withdrawn from the bank account in March 2018 and used to pay off the remainder of the mortgage on her property, which she told Gardaí was the proceeds of a life assurance policy that she had for her late husband. But they didn't, the analysis of her financial accounts couldn't prove that.
Yeah, I mean, I think people
There's a paper trail with everything, isn't there?
There is, and if there's not a paper trail, that's also a problem, because you're still spending money and living. And if you can't provide a paper trail, it's even more of a problem, because that just means you've got big wads of cash and you're going around living off that.
Yeah.
And that has proved to be a problem in cab cases.
And that's why the gambling comes in, you see.
That's why the gambling comes in.
Probably the easiest excuse as to why your pockets are loaded with cash, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, absolutely.
Yeah. But then they look for a betting slip.
And even when they had betting slips, of course, with John Gilligan, that wasn't enough, was it? I mean, John Gilligan provided loads and loads of betting slips, but it still didn't add up properly for him,
So look, I suppose I was talking to Eamon about this recently in regards to the state's crackdown on money laundering, which is very much in play at the moment. We've seen a huge amount of people before the courts charged in relation to even small cash amounts. I mean, even Graham the Wig Whelan was caught with a Rolex watch, and he paid cash, I think, for a room in a hotel. I couldn't explain it.
It was 5,000 or 6,000 euros. Yeah. So it's not a huge amount of money. And I think the real change in policing culture is to charge some of the women associated with people who are suspected of being involved.
Because for a long time they were literally able to sit on the sidelines and claim they knew nothing about any of it.
100%.
But I think that is definitely a change, and it's sort of, I think there's so much money laundering going on because there's so much money in the country washing around the drug networks, that it's probably a clever plan to go after the money, really, and to put a little bit back into the state coffers, because the policing of all this costs a fortune.
Yeah, I mean, certainly back in the day, if you look back in the 20 years ago, the women never went near. Maybe cab cases would seize a certain amount off them, but the idea that people would be prosecuted for money laundering, I think, only really began with some of the cases involving the Kinnigan cartel, like the wife of Mr. Nobody, Deirdre Brady, where she was prosecuted and ultimately sent to prison. And I think that was a kind of a break from what had gone on. But again, you're right, there's this huge amount of money washing around.
And like even taking the Keane network, like, I mean, they're how long in business? 40 years?
I suppose so, yeah. I mean, it's 40 years, yeah.
40 years, and they're still going. I mean, it was said in court that, the Keane outfit is supplying drugs in their area and beyond.
Yeah.
That was evidence given in court. Like, I wonder how much they pull a year and what they do with it. Well, and do they have that sort of attitude that you've profits, but you also have losses, so you walk away from those losses and you just keep going?
Well, I think you can see in much smaller criminal networks, if there is a seizure of either money or drugs, that can actually bring them to a crashing end.
It can.
I mean, and it does.
So what do they do with the money? Why can't they can't save it?
Well, I mean, you'd have to be disciplined, wouldn't you? You'd have to, so, I mean, ideally, I suppose, the bigger operations put aside a certain, they do accounts, I suppose, in their head, at least, if they don't write them down, and say, 20% is going to have to be written off. So we have to save that money in reserve for either drug seizures or things going wrong. And, you know, there was always talk that the Kinnan network did that in particular, and always paid their debts, whether drugs were seized or not. And that builds up, then it builds up a relationship. So if something does go wrong, they can still get supplied. And there doesn't become this demand for that debt to be paid straight away. Not dissimilar to the big construction companies where the banks, you know, when there was a crash, they were given a lot more leeway than the small builders who instantly the debts were recalled. Yeah. Instantly recalled. So the more sophisticated networks have to factor that into the system. And you can see that, I suppose, the Keane network have managed to survive through that. They'll have built up those relationships with people. Because a lot of this business is mostly on credit, really, isn't it? One way or another. There's a huge amount of...
money's there somewhere in the ether.
It's somewhere there in the ether, but there's a lot of...
My brain.
Too big, yeah, but there's a lot of the credit system.
Glad you didn't repeat that.
No. It's not too big for your brain.
It is a bit. Sure. I do wonder where it all. I mean, if you could physically see it, it's just in the economy, of course.
But of course,
it's in the economy because, you know, even in this case, you see, there's a Rolex watch. The son, Warren
had a
Rolex watch at the time of the raids, obviously in the June of 2020. Like, I wonder with Rolex and companies like that, the sort of stuff that the gangsters like to wear and to buy. Like, if you took that money out of that economy,
what would happen?
What would happen?
Well, I mean, I can't remember the statistic on Colombia, like during the boom of the 80s, the narco boom with Pablo Escobar and that. But they had, like, obviously they generated a phenomenal amount of wealth for themselves, but it was adding some. I can't remember the figure, but just say 30 or 40% to the overall economy of the country. And that figure could be wrong. I'd stand to be corrected. So it seeps back in.
It does.
And in particular to things, in that case, it was seeping into banking and property. Yeah. So it was causing a boom there.
Property construction, the car industry, the luxury jewellery market, the luxury clothing market.
And they
those.
Yeah, and they had that in Miami as well at a similar time. It was just pumping this money into the economy. Because, you know, these guys are not squirreling it away, really, are they?
I always find it interesting, like, you know, the places which are sort of, I suppose, hotspots for this kind of drug money and all the rest of it, you know, Marbella, Port Banús. And I mean, you can't blink, but there's another very high-end designer shop.
Yeah.
You know, we're seeing a little bit of that happening, filtering into Ireland as well. I mean, there's certain designer brands that are now available and on high streets that you just wonder what legitimately you'd have to earn to be able to afford them.
Did you ever, I know Cocaine Cowboys being your book, but I don't know if you ever saw that documentary with a similar title. And I mean, you just see there's interviews, I think, with the guys selling cars, and they just know these are drug dealers coming in to buy them.
Sure, they're the only people who can afford them.
And they're receiving it, and it's openly acknowledged that these transactions are occurring. There's luxury goods being sold in Dublin, you're dead right. I mean, who can afford a handbag for, what is it?
7,000 or something.
I mean, who can afford it? Like,
I don't know. I mean, maybe a once-off in your lifetime if you really desire to have one. And, you know, you have a big, I don't know. Some people can afford it, definitely. But I mean, I think it's more the kind of when you see, you know, you see young guys mainly and girls in their early 20s and late teens, and they're walking around in the real gear, like t-shirts worth 300 or 400 quid, and they might have 6-7 of them.
Yeah.
I don't know who can afford that.
Who can afford that? I mean, there's obviously...
Do you think we're just poor?
No, well, I think we're just sort of in the middle, like most people. And I think the only people who can afford it are the super wealthy, which there are super wealthy, and they may be up to no good as well.
Most people surely have to get paid every month, or else the whole thing comes crashing down.
There are some super wealthy out there that don't ever have to worry about money.
Definitely there are. And there's plenty of legitimate industries that have made people super wealthy. Journalism and media is not one of those, unless you own the media company.
Then you have the people in the black economy.
Yeah.
So they're living a sort of similar lifestyle.
Yeah.
The drug dealers and the super wealthy. And then there's the rest of us
plebs.
in the middle. Shopping and tea.
I like the way you think you're in the middle.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. I think we're down the notches.
Well, no.
Sometimes it feels that way.
Yeah.
Anyway, fascinating, and we await to see if Christy Keane's sister gets jail or a suspended sentence.
Yes.
Leave that up to the judges.
Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.